The big story right now in the NFL, of course, is the labor strife that's going on. People trying to see if they're going to be able to put together a new agreement here, and the lockout is looming. Let's speak with one person that has some expertise in this. She's the only female to ever have the title of Vice President, Legal Counsel, and GM in the NFL. Back in her time with the Philadelphia Eagles, she is Susan T. Spencer. Her brand new book, Briefcase Essentials, hits bookstores and is available on Amazon come March 1st. She joins us for a few minutes here. Susan, thanks for the time. How are you doing this morning?
Oh, great. How are you doing?
Doing fine. Susan, are you in L.A.?
No, I'm in Las Vegas.
Jeez, you had to get up early to be on our show.
Yeah, you better be worth it.
Man, we're not that good, Susan.
Well, you're going to get better with me.
Susan, before we get started, tell us a little bit about the book, Briefcase Essentials. Why did you write it, and what's the gist of it?
Briefcase Essentials it's not about cosmetics, guys, so just forget that. It's a business book. I wrote this book after I sold my last meat company because over 15 years, I was very successful in business. I didn't understand why. I just kind of found my way and just kept doing different things, and they seemed to work. And I wanted to write a book and tell other women what I did and said, look, there's no magic to this. There's about a dozen skills women have. You probably don't know you have them. I want you to know you have them so you can do what I did and use them effectively and be successful. And I wrote the book, and I thought it was going to be just a walk in the park. I can do this. 3 years later, it wasn't so easy. It was hard going. When you're not a writer for a living, it's not what you do. It's really hard going. And when you relive a lot of stories that you thought were kind of not really important at the time, and you have a chance to have some perspective from a distance, it really makes a difference. It's very cathartic, number one, for the writer, but it's also, you get to reflect on a lot of things that maybe you didn't do right, and you kind of kick yourself a lot and say, boy, that was just not right. I didn't do that right. But at least you can, as you reflect on it, you're able to give some advice on what you didn't do right so that other people don't make the same mistakes you made.
Susan, obviously we're a sports show.
Yeah.
You are the only female GM in the history of the NFL with your time in the Eagles back in the 80s. I'm just curious, what did that experience, how did you draw from that experience, and did you include any of that in your book?
I did. There's 3 chapters on the Eagles,
mm-hmm.
and I indicated in the same. I kind of weave a story. Every one of my chapters is a story
mm-hmm.
about something that happened, but it's a really fast read, and the purpose of it is to kind of show through examples of things that I did, so that you can remember the example. You don't have to remember the skill; just remember the example, and you'll figure out what it is you need to do. And in the Eagles era, it's funny because that was the first all-male environment that I ever worked with. And after that, I went into the meat business for 20 years. So what does that say?
Yeah.
I guess I liked it. I thought it was amazing. The entire staff was absolutely non-generic in terms of they couldn't care whether I was male, female, whatever. It really didn't matter. It was not an issue with anybody. But I think that if I was not prepared for the job, it would have been an issue. But because I had my own business before that, and then I went to law school, and then I came out of law school and practiced law for a couple of years before I went to the Eagles, I was a little bit seasoned, not very seasoned, but a little bit seasoned. I wasn't a kid anymore. And I think that I was able to do that job, and I really liked it. And I love football, so it was pretty easy for me. The only thing that was difficult is, I'm sure you know, the Philadelphia fans are tough ones.
Oh, yeah.
Really tough ones. And the last thing they wanted was a woman in any kind of position at the Eagles, because they thought that my position there would not be a good thing for the Eagles. So they were very angry at the owner, my dad, and they were very angry at me. So every time I left, when we had a game, I had to wait about 2 hours till the game was over till I could go out. Because if I didn't, I'd get everything thrown at me imaginable.
Susan, now you say that people at the Eagles back then didn't care whether you were a man or a woman, but
nope.
I was reading something where you went into the locker room one time and everybody dropped their pants.
Well, actually, I'll take this story just to the threshold, and
okay.
Then if your listeners want to get the real story and see what I did, They have to buy the book.
Oh, okay, okay.
They weren't wearing pants at the time.
That's a tease. That's a tease, by the way.
That is a tease.
Yeah.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give you a tease.
Okay.
At the time when I was with the Eagles, I was responsible for the budget, among other things.
Mm-hmm.
And I had allocated a lot of money for a particular type of rehab equipment. And our athletic trainer at the time, Otho Davis, had been with the organization about 30 years, a really wonderful, brilliant, fabulous man. And we were very, very friendly, although when I first met him, I thought, this guy's really going to be a chauvinist jerk. But he wasn't at all. He just was tough on the exterior. He was fabulous. And we were really good friends. So he called me up and he said, Susan, I got that equipment you let me order. And I said, oh, that's great. He said, come down, you have to see this. I want to show you how this works, so you make sure you know you got your money's worth. So I said, well, where's your office? In those days, our offices were in the Vet Stadium, which is no longer. They replaced it with another stadium. And I was on all the offices were on the second floor, coaches, staff, everybody. But the infrastructure was in the basement. Mm-hmm. So he said, I'm in the basement. So I said, oh, well, where? Because, I was never down in that area. One place I never went, guys, was the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to be there. I was a professional. I was signing players' contracts. I was traveling with them on the road. The last thing I needed to do was be in the locker room with those guys. So I made sure that I never stumbled in there by accident. So he said to me, well, my office is right behind the locker room. So I didn't give it any thought because it was off-season. And during off-season generally, it's really quiet, especially like in the down days of March, early April. No one's around. So it never dawned on me anybody was going to be in that locker room. If it had, I certainly wouldn't have gone there.
Mm-hmm.
So I go down to the basement level. I open the door. I get in. I get about 3 steps into the room, and there's 5 naked players there. They had just come out of the shower.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't wearing towels when I walked in.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of emotions that said, okay, what do I do here? My first emotion, what do you think it was?
You get a raise.
No. Close. My first emotion was, oh, crap, I got to get out of here. I'm going to scream and run. But I didn't. So I'm not going to tell you what I did, but I can tell you that I was able to navigate my way through that locker room to Otho Davis's office and still maintain as most of my dignity as I thought I could.
She is Susan T. Spencer, former GM and the only woman ever to hold the GM post in the NFL in the history of but essentially aimed at women and how to make them better in business, right?
Right, and most of the men that read my book say, I really learned a lot about how women think about business, because one thing that always surprises men is that women come up with a completely different way of looking at the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not bad or good, it's just different. And when they read it, they say, aha, now I understand something about women's minds, which is not exactly the same as men's. And I think it gives them a much better insight into who we are. And if you're trying to work with women and move them in your organization, the better you understand them, the better able you're going to be to manage them.
Susan, real quick, you've been successful in other business, like you said, the meat business. What's going on in the NFL right now in that meat business? Is this lockout thing going to get solved? How serious of an issue do you see it?
I think it's interesting that I see the dynamics of it very similar to 1982 when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very similar. The personalities are similar. You've got an owner rep who kind of has a hot temper, and we had the same thing in 82. You have what we were worried about in those days was that because the players did not get a piece of the TV pot in those days, and we were fighting not to let them have it, and they didn't get it in that particular lockout. Now they already have it. Now it's a question of how much of the pot are they going to get to keep and how much are the owners going to keep. And in this particular one, it's a little bit unique because you've got a new executive director of the Players Association.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an unknown. He's not a player. He's somebody who came from the outside. He's an attorney, very qualified attorney.
Yeah.
But again, an outsider. And I'm sure in order to win that position, he had to make a lot of promises to these players. Because in order to get a title, if you're unknown, you're going to make a lot of promises on what you're going to bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to have to do something really spectacular for him to keep his job. and I'm sure he knows that. So obviously he's not going to just have a ho-hum discussion. He's going to have to try to move that needle for them. And the owners are trying to keep the needle going the opposite way. So I think that it clearly, March 3rd is not going to be met. You're not going to have a deal by March 3rd. There's absolutely no upside for the owners to do that. Why would they do that? They're not getting anything for it. So they're going to let that time frame go. So the collective bargaining agreement will lapse. Whether the one thing that is good that I see as a positive is the mediator. In this particular case, we had a federal mediator as well. But I didn't feel that federal mediator was that effective in the beginning. This particular mediator, who's the head of the Federal Mediation Board appointed by Obama, George Cohen, is very talented. He's a labor lawyer. He's done the soccer league. He's done a bunch of others. Yes, it's not easy, and it's not going to be short, because when you go through the kind of issues they're going to raise, there are some perplexing issues, ones that bother me as well. How do you take care of players who are no longer playing with their health insurance when there's a lot of health issues? That's a big one. That's a big dollar one, and it's a big issue. It's a big perplexing issue. That's one that the players certainly care about. And I doubt that they want to play 2 more games in the season. I wouldn't if I were them, because they're only going to add more injury. And that really doesn't help them, although they're going to get paid per game for those 2 games. I don't think that one's been on the table about 10 years.
Yeah.
And it was never really popular when it came up. They even waived it by us in the 80s. So I don't know. I don't know how that one's going to go down. I don't think that's going to happen. Maybe they'll split it. Maybe there'll be 1 more game. I don't know. But what we ended up doing is only playing a 9-game season that year.
Yeah. I remember that.
And I hope this one doesn't go that long. They've got a lot of time ahead of them. They've got a good mediator, but they have 2 unknowns. They have an owners committee that seems to be on the upside, wanting to get something out of this negotiation, because I think that Richardson felt that he gave away too much in 2006 when he agreed to roll that one over for 5 years. So now he's got to prove something.
Gotcha.
And one of the things that's always interested me is, as a business person, because I look at it as a sports person, I look at it as a business person, is the league has never wanted to show the books, and they probably never will. They'll never show their books. No business is going to open up their books to somebody else, because then it becomes a shooting match, and then everybody knows their books. It just is not something that business people do. It's not realistic.
Yeah.
There is a way to back in to where the owners are and what their values are, by looking at the valuations of each team, and then doing a present value for that number. So they don't really need to see the books. If they went a different angle and talked to me, I'd tell them how they could figure it out without having to look at the books, and they'd still get a very good idea of what kind of margins the owners are making ultimately, and then they could use that number as kind of a measuring stick. She
is Susan T. Spencer. Her book, Briefcase Essentials, is available at Amazon.com and all the bookstores. Susan, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that our fans, and me included, will get a chance to watch a full season.
The league